The issue around the tribes, the different cultures between the groups is a major problem. But I think it's much deeper than that. It's to do with the fact that poverty has been entrenched in Kenya for some time. Their leaders have not delivered. A lot of poor people do not have jobs, do not have any form of security, and the prospects for the future for them looks very, very bleak. So I think that coupled up with the element of corruption, which we've seen across Africa, with Kenya not being singled out for any particular reason, corruption has manifested itself in Kenya. The poor have seen the money come in, but it hasn't actually trickled down to them, and that's the major problem. I think we've got to look at it in context. The major reason why a lot of Kenyans feel frustrated, they feel disillusioned, they think that they've got no hope at all, is that if you look at the basic index by which all developing countries are monitored and seen as a means of progress, the Human Development Index, clearly you can see that life expectancy is only 48 in Kenya. Nearly 80% of the population live below the poverty line, and for those, to give a perspective of that, is living below $1 a day. And if you think about the fact that infant mortality rate, it's about 80 to every 1,000 kids that are born. So if you look at it in perspective, the economy itself has not really worked in the interest of the masses. What you have is, you have economical development. Clearly we have economical growth. In Kenya, I think it's about 5%, which is very, very good per GDP. But the poor masses have not received anything that can actually offer them hope, offer them a future. And what we're seeing is a population that's traumatized. The issue about tribes is a major factor in Kenya. And the two groups, the Kikuris and the Luas, the two largest groups, clearly have not seen eye to eye in the past. And any form of rainbow coalition, any form of agreement is unlikely to actually hold dear, because the differences between the two is so much, and it's stemmed over time, that you're unlikely to find any quick fix measures with a coalition of any sort, really. And the reasons are for this. It would mean that he would have to relinquish a lot of his powers, which he has already. It would also mean that the constitution would have to be changed. He would have to call in Parliament. Parliament would have to debate it for some time, and there are no guarantees that the Parliament would agree to such a change. And for Mr. Odinga, on his side, he would look at it from the perspective that if he gets more power, it means that Mr. Kibaki becomes a lame duck. He becomes a figurehead. So on both sides of the argument, each one of them doesn't want to become a lame duck. Each one of them wants to have the constitutional power that gives them the mandate to bring about change in terms of the constitution, controlling the cabinet, controlling the parliament. So it's going to be very, very difficult. The only way forward, personally, that I can see some agreement happening is if the international community backs it up with economical reform, backs up with a suitable package, financial package for Kenya, looks about sorting out the entire judiciary, really, and finding a resolution as to why the elections failed, but also finding, giving hope to the population in terms of jobs, security, but and also disarming all these militia groups that have, well, they've literally come overnight, really, and there are quite a few of them out there. On the other hand, we've stated that there's an election which was fraud. On the other hand, we've decided to accept the precedent for what is. We're also asking for constitutional reform to accommodate Mr. Odinga. And it's all very complex, because how can you do all of that all at the same time when you're talking about the principle behind it, which is the elections themselves, as being flawed? So really, I would have liked to have seen fresh elections called, but seeing that we haven't got that, based on what we have at the moment, the coalition, it may happen in the short term, but in the long term, it's unlikely to last, because we've had loads of coalitions in the past before that haven't really materialized. And the reasons behind that is to do with the fact that you have tribes which are part of each group, and these groups do not work as a team. And I can't see it happening now. These are the paramount for Kenya to ensure that the industries survive, the economy is vibrant, and for that to happen, you need the economy to be moving, and you don't need disruptions. As you know, a lot of businesses closed, be temporarily when the clashes were at its highest, and some are only just trying to start off again. In many other quarters, some can't start at all because some of the communities that they relied on to carry out basic work have moved on. Some level of ethnic cleansing that was happening, some people had to move away from their communities because they were forced to do so. But I think the major problem is to do with the ports. There are loads of ships out in the ports which have docked, they've got cargo in them, and they can't be offloaded. When we have trucks that can actually maneuver these cargoes across the country, the truck drivers are unwilling to do so because they fear for their lives. So in this sort of climate, the prospect in terms of Kenya losing jobs, losing businesses is great. And there's some statistics that are floating around which shows that they earned about $1 billion in tourism last year, and they're only going to do so only about 100 million at best this year. So major shifts in terms of the economical power of Kenya over the next few months and years. Way we can actually cement what we have on the ground now, and that's by actually doing punitive sanctions against any member of the parties, be it Kibaki or be it Odinga. If they fall foul of the agreements that are signed, then we're talking about financial sanctions, we're looking at travel sanctions, and even international isolation. And if those terms and conditions are attached with what I've just mentioned, then we may see some results, assuming it's tied up with some level of timetable, some timetable that shows that things will be done within some specific time frame, which can then be sold to the local people, because the population needs to buy into all of this. We're talking about Raila Odinga and Mr. Kibaki, but what about the population? The population who are traumatized, who are disillusioned, who've got no jobs, who've got no future, in many respects in the slums, in both Kumasi and in the capital. We have situations where there's a split along ethnic lines. Even though people are poor, there's this issue of ethnicity. So we need strong sanctions against anyone who breaks whatever terms and conditions are agreed on now.
Okay, what kind of sanctions are we talking about? Are we talking about United Nations Security Council sanctions? Are we talking about sanctions on the part of the international community and individual governments? Could you elaborate on that, Mr. Johnson?
We're talking about individuals. The two leaders here are Mr. Odinga and Mr. Kibaki. Everything lies on them. If Mr. Odinga decides that next week he wants to call a rally, which may likely to cause instability in the country because the police may end up shooting some people, then he should be brought to account. If Mr. Kibaki, on the other hand, doesn't adhere to the agreement that have been laid down for which he signed and decides to start dithering or not fulfilling his own side of the bargain, then he should be, some level of serious pressure should be brought on him, whereby if he were to refuse, he could find himself in a position which he would rather not be in. Mainly in terms of refugees, populations that have been displaced have found themselves in these countries, and of course, you know, a lot of these countries are very poor. They do not have the infrastructure in place to support their own populations, let alone assist others who are there. The World Food Program has actually increased its volume of assistance to those communities, but I don't like to look at it that way. They said if you've got a problem in your country, those who are neighboring you, bordering you, should assist. But the thing is, Africa is very poor. The countries do not have the capacity to assist, and I think that's where the problem is. Kenya received, I think, close to, I think it was $1 billion over a 5-year period, and which is a lot of money. And when you look at Kenya today, and you look at the statistics, which gives us a reflection of that economy, it hasn't trickled down to the masses. Where has it all gone? Where is the money?